G'day folks, how you going? The Aussie Traveler here. It's the 4th of November. And wow, hasn't things really progressed with the international travel into Indonesia? Let's have a little quick look at that. Well, as we said several shows ago, that October was going to be the biggie for international travel into Indonesia. And yes, it certainly did happen, and it has happened. Many countries now are invited to come into Indonesia with that corridor system. Maybe 10, 12 countries now. And I think you'll find it's going to start growing. Australia isn't there yet. It will be. Our president has been talking with their government over there. 100% we know that. We're awaiting our announcements right now on whether Australia will be able to use that tourist visa system or that corridor system before Christmas. It was supposed to be announced early November, but it hasn't happened yet. Not quite sure why. But I did call the office there this morning and they said, well, you know, it's still coming, be patient. So that's the news from Australia about tourist visa into Indonesia. It's still not quite there yet, but it is coming and it will be before Christmas, so they say. But if you're one of those countries around the world that can go into Indonesia at the moment with that bubble system or that quarantine system, you can enter into Indonesia with that tourist visa. All that you simply need to have is your double vaccination certificate approved by the government, which means that you will have to upload your certificate of vaccination from your country to the Indonesian government website. Then you will be given the green light to, yes, you can enter into Indonesia with your vaccination certificate. You will need that, and I will leave a link down below for where you can upload that documentation for that to be approved. If you have any questions about that, talk to an agent. I will leave my agent information number down below, and you'll be able to click on that and send Harry, my good friend, some questions, if you like, about that, and he'll certainly answer them, no problems. And if you have your own agent, talk to them. They'll be able to explain that to you as well. 72 hours before you land into Indonesia, you have to have a PCR test from your country, and it has to be negative, can't be positive, otherwise you won't be able to get in. The other thing you'll have to have, of course, is insurance. You'll need to have some insurance. Just Google it, they're everywhere now. A month or so ago it was hard to find insurance companies, but now they're popping up everywhere. So if you had a favorite insurance company once before, odds are on they are probably got policies out now already. Another one is your flight company, your airline company. They may be offering insurance with your ticket system. If you buy a ticket through them, you may be able to get some insurance through them as well for a little extra cost. I know my airline company that I use offers that, and Emirates too is very, very vocal about their insurance that they supply with their ticket system as well. Have a look at your airline company. Maybe it is about to fly into Indonesia. If it is, simply ask them, are you offering insurance? Maybe they will. The big question at the moment that everyone's been asking me is the quarantine system going on over there at the moment. Yes, it was 8 days, then it was down to 5 days, now it's down to 3 days. Remember we talked about this a few shows ago where the Indonesian government was testing some of their procedures, and they've already changed their mind a couple of times. They've dropped it from 8 down to 5, now down to 3. And it's already in the pipeline, I hear, that it may drop down to 0 quarantine time by the end of the month. Although it hasn't been 100% verified yet, but I know they are talking about it. And that's part of that testing system that I told you about that the Indonesian government are trialling. and that is one of their biggies, and it was the quarantine system. Now, the other one that everyone is kind of asking me about is, what is this QR system that everyone's talking about or having to have? Well, if you're in Indonesia at the moment, you're in Bali, or you want to go to Indonesia, you want to go to Bali, and you want to go to a restaurant, you're going to have to download the QR coding system, where they'll have a little display at the front of their hotel, or they'll have a display in the restaurant or a bar, or entry into a mall or a plaza, or even a beach, or a taxi or an Uber. You will have to QR code, and that will store information about where you've been. This is a good thing. It's not a bad thing. It's not about governments, and it's not about Martians trying to keep track of you. It's about safety. Now, if you enter onto a beach and later on they discover that there may have been a contaminated person around that location around your time, they will simply contact you and say, Russ, possibly COVID was in your area. So what will I do? I'll take that information and I will then act on it. I will go and get a PCR test, or I'll go and see a doctor, or I'll make plans to go home to Australia. Not quite sure how I'm going to handle it, but the system is in place. If something happens in your area and you've got your PCR code in place, they will simply just contact you and say, that taxi that you were in, a couple of rides before you, there was a COVID case. So I would want to know that information, and they will be able to contact you with that system. We are kind of using that in Australia at the moment. There is some haters for it, but then there's a lot of people that are using it, like I do. And I would want to know if something was happening or happened before I got there or while I'm there. And that's simple. They'll just contact you and say, be careful. This is a good thing. There's lots and lots of interest at the moment with travel agencies putting packages together. I'm sure they're doing it around the world, but here in Australia I hear it more and more every day on the radio, and I see it in social media, that there is deals and things happening to Indonesia, and other parts of the world too, but they seem to be focusing in on Bali at the moment. So yeah, there is going to be a lot of influx into Indonesia soon. Whether Australians are going to happen to be able to get into there before Christmas, well, that's not 100% sure. It looked like it's going to happen, but at the moment, it's not quite there yet. But if you're from anywhere around the world, you can enter into Indonesia if you are one of those countries that's been invited. And hopefully here in Australia, we will be too. I did tell you last show that I spoke to a very, very popular online accommodation booking site. They told me that, you know, it had jumped amazingly with the requests and people looking at accommodation in Indonesia. Well, I spoke to them again only a couple of hours ago, and they said it is insane. Worldwide, people are very, very interested and booking accommodation in Indonesia and Bali right now. Where a month ago, it wasn't so busy, but it absolutely is busy now, they said. So, getting into Indonesia at the moment is quite difficult. A lot of planes are still, or airline companies are still watching and looking to see what's going on. It's not easy landing a huge big aeroplane in a country. There's procedures that's got to be in place. You've got to be able to fuel that plane. You've got to be able to clean that plane. You've got to be able to have security. You've got to be able to have, you know, people to take your bags off the carousel. All these things need to be in place. And I know that it was announced that October was the opening date, but it is going to take a little bit of time for all those airline companies to come on board. And more are. And maybe your airline country that comes in from your country may be entering into Indonesia. So have a little Google and see where they're up to, like I did with my airline company. And I know when they're going to start traveling into Indonesia. And I know it's going to be soon, so I'm excited. The other thing that people seem to be confused about is it is a couple of things actually that people are confused about. They're confused about the quarantine. It is only 3 days at the moment. They're confused about the insurance. Yes, you do have to have insurance. The PCR test you must have before you leave your country. You must have that 72 hours or within that 72 hours before you land into your airport, whether it be Jakarta or Denpasar. You must have that PCR test and it must be a negative. Insurance, you must have insurance. And yes, you can take children into Indonesia. Someone said to me, you can't take children into Indonesia. Well, that's rubbish. Of course you can take children into Indonesia. There's no ban on kids going into Indonesia. Not that I'm aware of. Supermarkets are starting to open up there and stock Western foods. No problems there. Those little shops and those little malls and those little outlets are all starting to open up now. If they're not opening up yet, they certainly are getting ready to open up. Some of my friends are saying that they're starting to paint and they're starting to tie it up and wash and clean. So they're also getting prepared for tourists to arrive into Indonesia. They must be excited. Because I made some very good friends with a lot of those stall holders there, and I'm really looking forward to meeting some of those people again. My taxi drivers, I want to see my regular taxi drivers again. I've been in touch with them, and they're all excited for it to happening. So yeah, I'm looking forward to my bintang and catching up with friends and locals. It really is getting exciting. For us Australians, we're not quite there yet. For the rest of the world, some of you countries can enter into Indonesia right now. If you're not quite sure, just Google or talk to an agent. There's not much more I can say right now. There is some huge news that I want to tell you about, but I can't right now because our Scott Morrison here in Australia hasn't released it yet. But hopefully in the next day or so, we may get that information, and then everyone in Australia is going to be super excited. And also Indonesia too. Keep an eye out on that quarantine. They may be lowering that 3 days down to a lower number by the end of the month. So that looks like it's going to happen. So if you're worried about quarantining into Indonesia at the moment, well, why not just wait a little bit longer? Because we know probably towards the end of the month that quarantine system, may vanish. But you may have to prove that you will have to prove that you've had your double vaccination, and your PCR tests need to be, up to date. And then probably have some other policies and procedures as well that you'll probably have to abide by. But that won't be a problem. The QR code system, I've explained that. You will have to have that if you want to enter into restaurants or any public place, if you like, or catch a taxi. You'll just have to quickly zap that. And the other big one is, what everyone seems to be confused about, is the upload into the Indonesian government with your vaccination certificates from your country. You do need to upload that into their system. I'll leave a link below. It's very easy to do. I've done it already and got my green light. And then you will need that when you enter into Indonesia. It's one of those things that you have to do. If you have any questions about visas, I can't answer them for you. I'm not qualified to do that, but Harry, my good friend, is. That's what he does every day, and he's been doing it for years. I will leave a link down below to his company, and also a information WhatsApp number, so you can just ask him a question and ask him anything. You can ask him if you are allowed to take kids into Indonesia at the moment, or what type of insurance do I have to have, or how much money I need to have in my bank. Well, they're the type of questions you can ask Harry, and I'm sure that he'll happily answer them for you. I'm the Aussie Traveler. I'm sorry it's not a big show, but hopefully you got a little bit out of it. Thanks for watching. It's Cookie.